On this episode of ResiWeek, we talk chips not being back till 2022, and AWS went down. All this and more on this episode of ResiWeek.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is ResiWeek, episode 306, Steamships.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by
Sennheiser
and by Crestron.
Welcome to ResiWeek. This is your weekly roundup of all the latest news and stories for the residential AV industry. I'm your host, Matt D. Scott for AVNation.tv, and this week I'm pleased to be joined by three of my good friends. First, we have Mr. Avi Rosenthal. He is a partner at Blue Suave. How you doing, Avi?
I'm doing well, Matt. Thanks so much for having me on.
Happy belated birthday to you as well.
I appreciate it.
Nothing worse than December babies, am I right?
Hey, Sagittarians make the best people.
I'm very happy that you think I'm one of the best people. That makes me happy.
There you go.
Then we have Mr. Richard Fregosa. He's the president of Fregosa Design. How you doing, Uncle Richie?
I'm doing good, brother. And actually, with our next guest coming in, you're going to be able to have a what is it? What they call them? The crossovers. We're going to have it's a crossover show. It's a crossover show. So
it's a crossover show where we're not talking about anything that's on your show. The gentleman, the esteemed gentleman that Uncle Richie's talking about is, of course, my good friend, Mr. Steve Greenblatt. He is the president and CEO of Control Concepts and a New York Giants fan, so be really nice to him. How you doing, Mr. Greenblatt?
I'm doing okay. We didn't need to bring that up.
Yeah, really, it was nasty yesterday. I turned it off.
I'm glad to be here with Rich, and we're going to put our fingerprints on this.
All right, let's kick this off with a highlight, shall we say, report from Deloitte. This comes to us from CE Pro. The report in question is a report from Deloitte that is indicating that the semiconductor supply will remain short through 2022. There is a boatload of stuff in this article, so go take a look. A boatload, yeah. There is so much stuff. According to their December 1st report, customers in mid-2021 were waiting approximately 20 to 52 weeks for multiple kinds of semiconductors. By the end of 2022, those lead times will be closer to 10 to 20 weeks. By early 2023, the semiconductor industry should balance out. Now, I'm going to take that with a grain of salt because, gosh, early 2021, like February, they were saying that it was going to balance out by mid-2022, and that obviously might happen, but it's not looking good. So, Avi, I want to get into a couple things with you first on this, but before we get into that, what is the average pre-pandemic, pre-garbage? What was the average wait time? Just so people know, like, is 10 weeks an average wait time, or is 2 weeks an average wait time?
8 to 12 was the quoted times, right? Yeah, 8 to 12. So if you say 10, right, it's in the middle. But 8 to 12, no problem at all. We were, placing orders with distributors and with manufacturers 8 to 12 weeks out. Got our stuff, not a problem. I have a couple of, real world issues that are going on. I mean, I don't think that the Deloitte report is wrong necessarily from its prognostication, right? Everybody's going to be conservative in their prognostication, but we're already seeing the rollback, right, of this sort of 52-week was the number that was given by everybody as sort of a placeholder. We have no idea when we're going to deliver your stuff. We have no idea when it's going to come out of the foundry, so we're just going to call it 52 weeks. In reality, very few things took the full 52 weeks. In reality, even the people who said 52 weeks, took 25 or 30. Now, that's still crazy, right? Don't get me wrong, but it didn't take 52. That was just sort of a placeholder. What's happening now is we're getting much more realistic quotes. And so we're getting the 20 to 30 week quote, but they're hitting the 20 to 30 week. And now I'm even seeing 15 weeks, and 15 weeks is getting back to reality. Chinese New Year coming up next month. Everybody is aware of it. The Chinese government has already announced that they're going to extend the amount of time that people are going to be, quote unquote, off work.
How kind of them.
How kind of? Well, that's how it works. We're actually starting to see some factories send some workers home, even as early as now, and we're expecting at least 50% of the workforce to be sent home by the end of this calendar year. Which, if anybody knows anything about Chinese New Year, it's about 2 weeks early, because again, the Chinese government is trying to limit. You've got the Shanghai train station, for instance. There have been days during the transit of Chinese New Year where you've got 10, 12, 15 million people, in a single day transiting through a train station. It's astounding. It's like, okay, everybody in New York City stand up and move 5 miles west, right? I mean, just everybody all at one time. So they're trying to limit that. And I look, I can absolutely appreciate it. God forbid there's a COVID outbreak, right? The whole world will come crashing down. And so they're spacing it out. What that's doing, though, from the supply line is actually a positive thing, because the folks in transportation are not the ones being moved out early. The factories are starting to close down a little bit earlier. Everybody was planning for this. We had enough notice to know about it. And so that's going to give the component suppliers time to play catch up. And so, Chinese New Year is going to be a watershed event in this sort of whole process.
How much of this report is a very concentrated view? Because it doesn't take into effect pre-show we were talking about, yes, manufacturing is starting to catch up. They're starting to, the supply issue is not necessarily this big thing we're expecting it to continue to be. It's the other factors. There's still a massive port issue. There's still I'm going to argue, an underreported transportation issue. Once it gets to the ports, what is that going to? Do you have any insight on what that's going to flush out as?
Yeah, so if you look on my LinkedIn feed, you will see, unfortunately, one of the most depressing reports that I have ever had the pleasure to post. And I even said that in my posting. I said, okay, this is really like wrecked my day. It was about a month ago, and it's all about the trucking industry and the fact that the trucking industry is in turmoil. And I don't blame the truckers. It's not the truckers' fault. It is the way that the mechanisms have all come around to them. A lot of them are leaving the long haul sector and going to short haul sector because there's more money to be made. The independents, as we've talked about, are having all kinds of troubles with laws and things that are changing and the amount of time that they can be on the road. They're not paid for the wait times at the ports. The ports are running very inefficiently. And so you've got a situation where, hey, you're an independent trucker. You get paid to bring the load from point A to point B. You only get paid when that load reaches point B. It doesn't matter how long it takes. So you have a choice. Go to, the Port of LA and sit for 5 or 6 hours in line to get your load, and then travel 16, 20 hours to get it wherever it needs to be and then offload it, or start in Arizona and take a load directly from Arizona to Texas, right? Boom, and get paid right away. These are the problems that the truckers are up against. And this, I agree with you, is sort of the underreported issues. There's the chassis issue, as they call it. The chassis manufacturers are way far behind in producing enough chassis to move the containers from point A to point B. Why are they behind? Steel is behind. Why is steel behind? Because they're not getting the raw materials. The whole thing is just one big domino. Now, there are bright spots. There are absolutely bright spots. The short haul guys are doing well. FedEx is starting to fix a lot of their problems. Amazon, doing a great job. Amazon's paying their people well. I know they sometimes get a black eye about that, about warehousing and things, and I'm not here to discuss the politics, but they are on-time delivery. UPS, another bright spot. And so the interior of the country, the railways are doing great business right now. The other thing that we're seeing is on the steamship side. The steamship recognized that they were overcharging, right? That supply had or demand had outstripped supply. They've pulled back on the pricing. The last time you and I talked, we talked about a 40-foot container costing over $40,000 to get across the Pacific. That's back down to a much more realistic $15,000. That's still about 3x what it was pre-pandemic, but it's a lot better than it was 6 months ago. Things are starting to flesh out. I also think that the Deloitte is looking at specifically supply line of chips. Meanwhile, the good news again, Ford and GM, their plants have been up and running now for more than 60 days without an interruption. which means that their supply lines have improved in 2021, which is considerably earlier than what was originally predicted. I mean, just look at Ford's stock price, right? It's up because their sales are up, their revenues are up. They've made commitments to smoothen out their supply chain in 22. Why am I looking at automotive when we're talking to integrators on the phone? Because it's all connected, right? If the automotive sector is doing well, it means that they can focus now on building chips for our sector. The AKM fire, mostly solved. AKM is now taking orders from their Asian CMs, their Asian contract manufacturers, for the turn on of those foundries. That's incredible news. We've been relying on third parties up until now, like Cirrus Logic and TI and others. That's going to take the burden off even more. So I'm actually much more positive about the outlook. Deloitte says end of 22. I'm going to sit here and put a stake in the ground and say by second half of 22, we're going to see a marked improvement.
That is fantastic news. Uncle Richie, when you read the article, when you see, because it's been all over the news. Heck, CBS Good Morning had a segment on it last week. When you see this, when you view it from the AV perspective, we've kind of taken the last year with supply limitations and kind of played it off to most of our customers, right? They're like, well, it's bad, but it's going to get better. If we take this as kind of our benchmark and say it's not going to be till 2023, till it's back to normal, on-demand ordering, whatever you want to do, however you typically ran your business pre-pandemic is how you will run your supply side of your business in 2023. How do we go about going into 2022 and planning properly from a business standpoint, not being so reactionary, but being proactive in the planning aspect?
Well, the first part in business, whether you could say fortunately or unfortunately about how you're going to succeed is your honesty with your clients. At the beginning, let's just say the beginning of this year, when you mentioned supply chain, it just went over everybody's head. It was just not part of the lexicon of anything. But now you have clients who are like, okay, yeah, my outdoor furniture, my wicker's not arriving for 6 months. I just got a call that, the quarry in Italy can't get a boat to bring our countertops over until summer. So there is, it's not necessarily like hammering home the point that there's just this lack of stuff, but it is an understanding that in the construction process that there are other industries being that are involved in this. And so a big part for me, and the one that kind of, it kind of got under my skin that I've not been a fan of, is a lot of times I've been hearing from manufacturers or sales reps from manufacturers who are chastising dealers who said, well, you should have just ordered more goods and just had it ready to go.
Come on, son.
Yeah, it's like, come on, we're talking practice. But, it was like, well, that problem, it's like, it's already gone. It's like, I can't order it now anyway to fill it. So why are you trying to slap me on the hand saying what I should have done? So I think also in the industry too, is there's this willingness to try to kind of want to, I don't understand why I told you so as a sales tactic necessarily. So my feeling is, kind of moving with it is no, take the partnership approach. Look, there's issues. I've had some pretty difficult conversations with clients where it's like we had a rush. And then we looked at the realistic timelines and I'm like, it's just not going to happen. And so we have a choice. I think realistically this can happen and it may slip still. And, we're doing 30-day check-ins going, okay, where are we with this? Or is it real? Is it not real? Is what's my manufacturer's coming with? And being able to provide to the client was like, look, your house is going to get built. This office, this headquarters is going to get built. My assumption is that my stuff is going to be delayed about the same amount of time as your other stuff. So let's start working with those timelines. And it places, and again, it depends on who you're working with as well. If you're working with an end user, if you're working with a general contractor, an architect, if you're working with a construction management firm or a consulting group, right? It does lead, it provides a good opportunity to start getting honesty from the other side. Because everybody who's been involved in any project that is construction related, which is what we are part of, the construction industry, whether it's a home, a business, a classroom, a corporate boardroom, everybody who's been doing this long enough has the general contractor come in and says, we've got to have this done in 3 weeks. Everything's got to be completely done, right? And it's got to be done. And so all of a sudden, everybody runs around. You got 50 people on site trying to get everything done. And then you find out, oh yeah, it's another 7 weeks before the tables and chairs get there. So
22 days later, he's hanging drywall.
Right. And then you have to start pulling out your contracts of what part of dust-free condition did we not meet, right? And you've literally got it. I remember, I laugh about the time that, I almost got hospitalized in a project in Park City during the Olympics because they were staining a 5-story structure with me there. And so I got overcome by the fumes, and I'm like typing away trying to get things done. And I'm like, this is not good,
Is his head supposed to be planted in his keyboard?
I'm floating. So
maybe we should call someone.
It is an opportunity for creating new dialogues with your partners, including your clients and the other trades that you work with. A big part that, like I said, what Avi gave was just a masterclass on why this is, why it is.
That's why he's here.
It is. But a big part, I don't think any of us anticipated the demand for electronic goods in our industry either.
Absolutely.
That also was because again, everybody needed to be connected. Everybody needed, there was a 4-month period that you couldn't buy a USB microphone if your life depended on it, right? Mm-hmm. Or a camera. These are things that, you could literally go into a Target at one point and have 4 to choose from. So, I think that, we're going to see this because of it's twofold, right? It is a perfect wave. We have the transportation issue. We have the getting the stuff from there to here. But then we also but people also ordered a ton more stuff. and so how you do? I just this past week, I'm getting stuff directly from China. It's, I've ordered some Apple products. They're not even getting warehoused in the U.S. at this point. Mm-hmm. It is literally being individually boxed at the factory in China with my name put on it and then sent via DHL here. It's crazy. I would have never thought that day would come, but because before, right? There'd be 1,000 sitting in a warehouse in Georgia, mm-hmm. and they just stamp it, flip it out, stamp it, flip it. They are coming one at a time.
It's
talk
crazy.
About just-in-time engineering. That's what we're seeing right now. It's crazy. So
I'm actually waiting for one of the control companies or the audio companies or somebody to figure out what this proved to me was how big the competition was between what we do for a living and people taking a vacation. Because one of the reasons why demand was so high is nobody took a vacation. And, you never thought about it to yourself as an integrator to say, my biggest competitor I always assumed was the kitchen counters, right? No. It turns out my biggest competitor is, hey, you want to go to Europe this summer or do you want a brand new home theater? And it was never plainer to me than it was during the pandemic when people were like, hey, I can't go to Europe. I'm putting in a home theater. Somebody's got to take advantage of that.
The redirection of funds has been phenomenal to watch. Steve, let's wrap this story up quick before we move on to our next one. How do you go about business planning going into 2022? Because we know that, again, supply will be an issue, but I don't think anyone has a really good handle on where that money is going to be spent.
Well, there's a lot of factors, and as you know and alluded to, I also come from the commercial side and looking at when are people going back to the mm-hmm. office, because that's going to have a huge impact on what does the commercial industry look like, and when they do go back, what are they going to need? Who's going to go back? What are the spaces going to be used for? So the same is on the residential side. What is the living condition going to be? What are the demands going to be? How much are people truly going to be working from home? As Avi mentioned, how much are they going to be traveling again? Because even if you're not working from home, even if you're working from home, that still doesn't mean that you're not traveling. So there's a lot of factors at play here that are going to impact what the demand is. And I think it's going to impact what manufacturers are making, product design. I think product development is getting spun up again, and it may not be taking the same trajectory that it was taking when things slowed down or when things had to be realigned. So there's a lot of factors at play here, and it's very tough to navigate, quite honestly. I think you have to take some guesses. You have to make some educated decisions. But I also think you have to be ready to be agile about it and shift and say, I think I'm going to hedge on this side, but I have a plan B, a plan C ready in place because this is where everything else is. So maybe it's 40% or 50% a prediction of going this direction, but the other two options are not too far behind. Mm-hmm. Whereas normally you would say, okay, I'm 80% and then I just need a 20%. So I think that you have to be ready to change course as you're going, and I think a lot of budgets are going to get reevaluated after first quarter, even after even on a monthly basis.
Yeah, I think it's really going to change. All right, gentlemen, let's hit our what will be our last story of the day. This comes to us from Business Insider. AWS was down on Tuesday of last week. This is an article from December 7th. AWS is Amazon's web services, a massive server farm, digital computing platform that literally everything you use on a daily basis runs off of AWS in some way, shape, or form. Heck, Azure feeds some stuff back into AWS, as does Google Cloud. It has literally become the backbone of everything you do online. But as I said, they went down on Tuesday for quite a period. It affected a boatload of stuff, from streaming services like Disney Plus and Netflix to Tinder to Roku devices to some crypto stuff to a bunch of. Rich, are you laughing at the Tinder or the Roku?
I'm wondering, like, the fact that you were sitting there just trying to swipe the entire time. It's like, this was not actually published in the news article.
Yes, it is. It says Tinder. No, it says Tinder. That's why I read it.
I'm worried about turning on my lights and he's swiping, you know?
I don't know what Rich is doing, and I don't want to know. Anyways, it literally took down so many things, but it also took down Ring, and it took down Overseer, and it took down Panamax's platform. It took down so much stuff. Rich, when you see this, it was one of those things that I noticed. The first thing I noticed it on was, I think, it took down Facebook and Instagram, which oddly enough, those were the first things that tipped me off that something was going off. And then through some other platforms saw the cascade. And then I started to get the emails from some of the manufacturers. What does it mean about the industry that for once it wasn't the user base having to explore and determine that some of these services were down, but that the manufacturers stepped up and actually said, hey, everybody's having a problem. Here's what's going on.
I thought it was great. I mean, I thought it was a very real world iteration of what we keep trying to tell clients about being proactive with these systems. And that, it's funny is that, a lot of my clients still are typically older than me. And so they're a generation ahead of us. And this also tends to be when we face most of that culture clash in between, because I've had clients, I'm going on 25 years I've been working with them. So I go back to, they had 10-foot satellite dishes, and tube TVs. And the fact is that the digital media and the terrestrial air and some of those things, yeah, they worked better, in a sense, in that they were not a binary equation. It wasn't an on and off. It was a static or blurry picture or, something issue. And as we've moved into, what we call the instant gratification age of consumption, of entertainment consumption, and the expectations of it, I found that this is now a necessary thing because clients' expectations, even of an older generation, they still have the thoughts of the old system of everything should still limp along, but I also want it now. And so trying to bridge that gap of the expectation management of the two is going to be interesting. Well, I'm just going to keep on talking as well. It's considering that we have, our welcome to a state of control.
I knew we would eventually.
I do think it's funny you guys are talking about network down and all of a sudden Matt goes away because, they heard us talking about network down.
It never fails. It must have been his.
I find it also interesting, Rich, that it shows the vulnerabilities. There's no doubt about it. I also equate it to sort of the early days of aviation because in the early days of aviation, a plane, God forbid, but a plane would crash. And we would learn from that situation. We would learn what happened and what affected it. And that problem would not happen again. And so each time one of these situations occur, you can say to yourself, okay, it sucked. There's no doubt about it. But we learned from it and we understand now how to reroute things. We understand how better to back things up and how to make sure that we have contingency plans for what's going on. So I find it very telling that the manufacturers have gotten good enough now that they do send out those emails. It shows the maturity within our industry. It used to be these things would go down and 3 days later you get a call from a rep saying, hey, yeah, I think we might have had a problem on Tuesday, but it's Saturday, so who the hell knows? Now they're monitoring the systems well enough that they understand what's happening as the users are understanding it. And so they're able to be proactive to say, okay, it's a problem. We understand it's a problem. We're working on it. This is what you can tell your customers. Instead of you getting the phone calls, the integrator, and going, I don't know, I'll have to look into it.
A big part is that, Steve and I, but in all honesty, Steve and I talk about this a lot, about, we call it, anticipatory service, right? The whole purpose of, this next level of automation, integration, whatever you want to call it, should be about anticipatory services, right? To find an issue, deal with it, self-heal if possible, and then go through kind of the triage process, right? What happened here? Is it a localized issue? Okay, let's start with a reboot. Is it a bigger issue? Is it network specific? Okay, let's take a look and start scanning what's going on in here. And then, you escalate to the next steps. So, it was refreshing. I mean, nobody likes an outage. Nobody likes the discomfort of it. But the fact that there was a process for once that got initiated, the game plan, it was like, I was able to proactively go, somebody would contact me. I'm like, let me tell you what just happened. And we had an answer. And that makes a big difference towards expectation management.
Steve, we've for years built AV systems based on local, right? Everything was localized. You wanted on-site media everything was localized. Everything is now shifted and clients are demanding remote. We have clients that don't care about on-site CCTV recording. They want it in the cloud. They just want to go to Ring and buy it and make it work. Are these instances the ones that give us the opportunity to contrast the difference between those two systems? Because previously, when you went and told a client, hey, that's great, but if power goes down or if a server goes down, you may not be able to do everything. This was one of those things where we had clients who had, they were locked out of their homes because their stuff wouldn't work. Is this going to become the case study for making sure that if you go full 100% cloud, that your client is aware of what those drawbacks are and you have them sign something so they don't yell at you later?
I think that answer probably comes in generations. And I think that, for a while, and again, I'll talk a little bit about the commercial side of things, is that we're still struggling to get things on a network. And then cloud was this big, bad, scary thing. And on the residential side, it's been embraced. And I was actually going to add, to the conversation that it's encouraging to see people's patience with it. And it's encouraging to see that people are accepting the fact that they do go down from time to time, just like anything else, just like your power goes down, just like your internet goes down. And then, but to your point, you have to categorize things. So when it comes to life safety, security, you do have to have a backup because that's a smart thing to do. But when it comes to entertainment, when it comes to lifestyle, you could afford to be able to accept downtime, and that's not a terrible thing because everybody else is dealing with the same problem. And I'm glad to see that we're starting to get more of a recognition for the fact that what we do does have some shortcomings just by nature, because we're all limited to the technology that it's based on, and we can't be perfect. And for so long, from a programmer's perspective, we always were the ones that were looked at as the weak link because I did this and it doesn't work, so fix it and don't let it happen again. And the bottom line is that the technology has flaws, and the technology is not going to be able to be up 100%. And there are things that are going to not work from time to time for one reason or another. And I think that stuff like this actually brings light and makes what we do, gives what we do a lot more credibility. So as much as nobody wants failures and nobody wants something to go down or have cause an inconvenience, it actually is probably not a bad thing for us pros that are in the industry making things work every day.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'll add as we close. I loved watching everything kind of go down for that fact, because for whatever reason, when you
he's a masochist, folks.
Well, no. But when you explain to a client that your system occasionally will not function the way they think it will, they look at you like you're crazy. Like, well, what do you mean? It's got to be perfect and work all the time. It's like, honey, Facebook with billions upon billions of dollars does not work all the time. Neither does Twitter, neither does Instagram, neither does Ring, neither does all of these other services. So when you do have these massive outages, like when 365 went down a year and a half ago, and it was down for 3 days, I was in heaven because I could go to all of my commercial clients and go back to that for a good solid year of, everything's going to be fine, but in the event of a problem, here's what happens. Well, what do you mean a problem? Remember when 365 went down? Yeah, like that. It happens. Stuff breaks. What are you going to do? Like, we just have to get back and fix it and get everything back up, and everybody's happy. All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today. Steve, if people want to connect with you, learn more about Control Concepts, where can they do that?
Connect with me on social media at Steve Greenblatt. Control Concepts is controlconcepts.net. We're lesser known on the residential side, but we do help to make products work together, and we do a lot of the behind the scenes work in the middleware part of the industry. So please reach out if you want more information about that. And as Rich will say, please check us out here. And we want the listeners to learn more about A State of Control at AVNation.
Very good. Mr. Fregosa, if people want to connect with you, learn more about Fregosa Design and A State of Control, where can they do that?
I'm impressed that Steve finally jumped in and started
pitch.
promoting our darn
Steve.
show. That was awesome.
I listen to you guys when I'm not doing this. He is normally
so modest about those things, and I'm sitting in the background going, "Do it, Steve, do it."
Brings a tear to my eye.
It was a proud moment, man. If you want to find me, you can Fregosa Designs the website at rfregosa on Twitter. You can type my name into the interwebs. But if you do want to find out about other verticals, you can follow my partner and host, Steve Greenblatt, on one of our monthly shows, actually recording this week, State of Control, talking about the AV programming industry. But the best place, honestly, that I do hope that you find us is here on AVNation.tv with our suite of shows serving all the verticals. And help us out, keep an eye on our sponsors and supporting them, and hopefully we can keep bringing shows like this to you that way.
Sounds like PBS up in here. All right, Avi, thank you for joining us. Again, happy belated birthday. If people want to connect with you, learn more about BlueSav, where can they do that?
So the easiest place to learn more about BlueSav is on our website at www.bluesav.com. As the only guy up here who doesn't have his own vlog or podcast, I could say, you can check me out on Twitter and Facebook, but really our website is the best place. And of course, we will be at CES, where I will plug just a little bit. We'll be at CES. I'm excited to be there. They're expecting a great crowd this year. Over 1,900 vendors have already signed up. So, please, if you're going to head out to the show and you want to know more about the integration world and why CES is important to it, reach out to me, Avi at bluesav.com. Be happy to hook you up.
Awesome. Thank you all for joining us today. If you'd like to connect with me, you can follow me on Twitter at Matt D. Scott and pretty much every other social platform. But more importantly, please stop by AVNation.tv, where you'll find this show as well as a wide variety of other shows with all the verticals that we cover. When you visit the website, please take a moment to check out our supporters. We are extremely thankful for their support and ask that you check them out as well. Thanks again for watching. That's all the time we have for this episode of ResiWeek.